Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special video that's the first of my monthly rant videos. Now if you don't know, if you are a patron of me on Patreon at the $5 or more tier, you have the option of giving me something to rant about for a video. I'll go ahead and read the details right now for you. You will be entitled to tell me one topic for me to rant about for a video, such as a specific video, a thing you like, a thing you don't like, asking my thoughts about anything, etc. I will, after 30 minutes of preparation for each topic, make a video compiling all the topics suggested by the patrons of this tier and ranting about these topics to the best of my ability. There will be a post each month for topics, and patrons of this tier can give me their topic each month they pledge at this tier or higher. So, this video is for the patrons who have patroned a video, have something for me to rant about. Rant, has some connotations to it. I really just want to use that term to refer to me talking at length about whatever. And Josh Adkins, our patron, aka the Lays Boy, has got a topic for us here today. So remember, if you want a topic for me to rant about in these monthly rant videos, just become a patron at the $5 or more tier, and you can give me a suggestion every month. So let's try this. Now, Josh Adkins says, tell us your thoughts about being a teacher in Japan, having been in the American education system prior to Japan. Differences, similarities, what you like and dislike about each system, and those sorts of things. And oh boy, is that a great question. A question that I find myself thinking about a lot, and it never really crossed my mind to make a video talking about it. It was just something that's always been on my mind that I just didn't put two and two together, that I ran a YouTube channel, that I should probably talk about this stuff with my experience. So I went through the American education system. I went to an elementary school from kindergarten to 5th grade, and then I went to one middle school from 6th to 8th, and then I went to high school 9th to 12th. Then I proceeded to teach. I went to university to become a teacher. I had a lot of field experience in student teaching, which is essentially being a teacher but not getting paid. Which some teachers would probably say, oh, so just being a teacher. But yeah, being a teacher without being paid. I was being paid in college credits, was when I was doing field experience in student teaching. So that was I was a teacher in America, just not being paid. I was on their employee list. I was considered an employee. I was just under a special situation where I wasn't paid. I was given credit. So as far as teaching in the American system goes too, I have experience in a little bit in elementary in the United States, none in middle school, and then teaching all across the board in high school, although that's relegated to what North Carolina considers the social studies, which includes history, economics, sociology, psychology, stuff like that. I had to teach psychology once, which is interesting because I never took a psychology class in school, so I was treading new territory with that. And now I teach in Japan, and I teach English in Japan at the elementary school level, kindergarten through 6th. But there's a lot of difference between elementary school in America and middle and high school. But in Japan, especially 3rd through 6th, you see the sense of continuity that will go into middle school and high school. Elementary school in Japan feels a lot more like an American middle school or high school than it does an American elementary school. It's interesting. But yeah, and being an education major, being a person who cares about education and does a lot of research into education and how children's brains work and how to best teach stuff, and someone who is really conscious about studying culture and stuff like that, I keep an eye out for what's going on in Japan and how it compares to America. So, we'll start with your simple differences, similarities. We'll go with that, and if I get on a tangent, I'll go on that tangent. But you start with differences. I think there is a very core difference between Japanese education and American education, and the very core difference is what is the purpose of school. Now, generally speaking, I think people would say the purpose of school is to educate someone to be a better citizen. And I would say that would be true of both the United States. And all I have, by the way, as far as the United States goes, is North Carolina education. Well, in Japan, things tend to be more divided as to whether or not your school is controlled directly by the prefecture or if it's controlled by your town. But in Japan, things tend to be a little bit more unified. But America education can vary from state to state. So my focus in America has been entirely in North Carolina. I would say the purpose of education in North Carolina is to be a better citizen, to be more informed about the world. I would say the purpose of education in Japan is to be a better citizen. But what it means to be a better citizen, I think, is very different in American culture and Japanese culture. Like how I have the flags back there. But how do I want to elaborate on that? Like, school becomes a community center, which it kind of does too in American schools. They're both similar enough concepts that they both have the term school applied to them, so there's going to be that level of similarities to them. But it's sort of a different feel. Schools become sort of a community center in the fact that people are just there constantly, and everyone's kind of expected to be there constantly. You're a teacher, you're going to be there forever. You're a student, you're going to be at school like really early and then leave anywhere from like 5-ish to even later, even though school ends earlier than that, because you're a lot of schools like have the requirement for you to join a club. While in America, I feel like a lot of people don't live at school in America. I think school is a big part of people's lives, but really the only people who stay there all the time are like the sports team people, and maybe some like people doing tutoring. But after school, and there are some not clubs in Japan, or at least in my experience. I know this is different from different schools, but from my experience, the clubs tend to be a lot more sports based, or a lot more like you will do something in this club that you will be able to present or something like that. Meanwhile, in America, I was the president of my anime club, and all we did was sit around and watch anime. I was actually in the library with some of my students, and they were playing the Nintendo Switch, because technically they had graduated, but they were still at school. Like I said, you graduate, but you're still at the school. Like, you're at the school forever until, like, obviously they're not there now. They graduated and moved on to a different school, but they had graduated the day earlier, and here they were chilling in the library because they were making thank you cards to the teachers because their teacher told them to. But they were playing the Nintendo Switch, and I'm like, you know what? When I was a student in America, we had this thing called the video game club that I was a part of, where every Tuesday you would go to the science teacher's room, and everyone would just play video games, and their minds were blown at that concept. Like, a club where you just essentially do nothing. That's insane. Like, it's impossible to picture that. It's insane. I think a big difference, one of the things that there are a lot of people who come from like America and go to Japan, and all they do is talk about stuff that bothers them. They're like, oh, I don't like how Japan has their students go to like go to cram school after school and during summer and spring breaks and stuff, so that they really don't actually have any break, and even once they leave school at like 6 or 7 p.m. they just go straight to another school until they have to go home and go to sleep. But like, I understand it's a cultural element. A lot of people in my family work to that degree of hardness. That's not how you do English. Work to that degree. It's not something that really bothers me that much. But one thing that I'm personally not a fan of is moral education. Moral education is a school topic taught in school that you're graded on, where the teachers teach you morals, Which, you know, it's hard to argue with that on paper, but it doesn't take long to think about that to go, because moral education, you know, when you hear stories about World War II and you hear stories about how the Japanese people, like the students, were taught to like give away their lives and die in the name of the emperor if the Americans ever invaded the homeland, that was something that was taught to them in moral education class. That's sort of what moral education class is. And since World War II, they've dialed down on the give your life for the emperor type thing, but there's an element to it that I think strips away like individual thinking that I don't really like that much. But Japan isn't necessarily one for individual thinking. National values are like the value of patriotism is taught in moral education classes, and this starts, you know, elementary school and goes all the way through high school, where you're taught to love your country. You're taught how Japan is unique from the rest of the world and how it makes you different than everyone else, which, you know, during World War II times was kind of used as a we're better than all these other Asian countries we're invading. I think moral education, even if we throw that stuff to the side, the weird stuff that could build a... I don't know how to describe it, but if we put that stuff to the side, what you still have is the government telling young, impressionable children what is right and what is wrong, and you have the teachers telling these people what are right, and at the same time, like, it's like, of course teachers should say, like, this is right, this is wrong. Being a student isn't just about learning how to do math, it's about learning how to treat other people. But I could see if moral education was introduced to the United States, a whole lot of people getting angry at either I could see a lot of people, like, on the right in America who don't like government intervention and stuff, saying the government shouldn't be telling our children what's right and what's wrong. And I can see a lot of people on the left in America who might not be so into the whole nationalism thing going, wow, what are you doing teaching us that God is the religion of the country and English should be what everyone speaks, and, you know, to love America. Don't you know America has problems? I could see everyone on all sides of the aisle freaking out if moral education was introduced to the United States. But in Japan, it's just there. It's been here since well before World War II. There was a break after World War II. It kind of stopped, and then it came back in, like, the 2000s. But it's here again. You don't kill yourself for the emperor, though. But you are taught to love your country. Which, you know, some would say is a good thing. I have flags up in my room, you know. It's hard to say that I don't like the idea of people loving their country. But I think that's something that someone should apply. Like, I think you should love your country if you understand everything about it and understand why you love it and understand the flaws and be able to love a country despite its flaws. I'm not necessarily okay with just mass indoctrination of love your country or else you'll get a bad grade. I think a lot of my time in university was spent trying to answer questions in the right way so that I didn't get a bad grade for thinking wrong. I know I'm focusing on the differences. Similarities, there are students. Let me tell you the average Japanese school day. For me, at least, from what I see the students go to. They come to school pretty early. They typically wake up around 6-ish a.m., come here around 7 a.m., which is fun for me because I sleep until like 10:30 some days. But they go to school real early. Sometimes there'll be a morning assembly where everyone gets together and, like, does a morning assembly, talks about the announcements, you know, figures out how to stay away from the Toyota Crayola disease. I've seen one morning, they're like, remember kids, that tire swing on that tree, that hasn't been used since World War II, so be very careful on it. In fact, we'd recommend you not use it at all. But, then they go into class, they have their classes, different teachers will come in for different subjects, like science is one of them. I come in for English classes. I sometimes do a little bit of helping with the PE classes, which is strange to me because I hate PE. Different culture regarding PE, by the way. In America, at least in my experience, like, PE happens, and, like, there'll be some students who are really into PE. Let's say they do a sport. Let's say we play soccer. There's going to be American students, because America is a really divided culture when it comes to sports, I think. Because you have one group of people that's like, my dad taught me how to play professional level soccer before I was even in kindergarten. And then you have those groups of people, and then you have the other group of people who are like, I played it every now and then. But I think America is more understanding that people exist. Well, I won't say that. How do I put it? There are people in America who like just don't do sports, period. And when sports get played in PE, the faction of people who have been playing sports since they were little will get really into it, and then they'll get aggressive towards the people who aren't that into it because they haven't been playing soccer since they were 3, and then they start yelling at the other people and putting them down, and that perpetuates the people who hate sports into hating sports more and believing that they can't do it, so they just give up. And to the point where, like, in high school, and I remember in my high school PE classes, people would be like, it's time to play a sport, and then half the class sits down and refuses to participate. And some of them participate, and, like, you know, that intense faction goes and participates. In Japan, almost nobody takes it to that level of extreme of like, God, I love sports. It's much more, the culture towards sports is much more healthy. There's much less of a culture of where someone does bad at, like, you know, say they kick the ball wrong in kickball. When I kicked a ball wrong in kickball, I would have 3 or 4 people just coming at me like, what are you doing? Like, you know, like just full anger at me. I'm like, you gotta chill, man. But in Japan, someone kicks it wrong and someone will be like, don't worry about it. And then, like, they reset and it's all good. Nobody's that intense. At the same time, nobody just sits down and refuses to participate. In fact, I would say it's safe to say that everyone kind of loves PE, which, when you compare that to the really polarized American PE class, I really like it. I think that's why I ended up enjoying teaching PE a little bit. Let's see. There are no janitors. The students clean up the school. There are no lunch ladies, like cafeteria ladies. The students pass out the food. And the students clean up everything. What do you like and dislike about... Okay, we can about what I like and dislike. This is much longer than I thought it was going to be, but this is a really good question. Now, what I like and dislike. What do I like about the American school system? I like sort of and you don't think about it when you're in America, but juxtaposing it against Japan's education system, I like the sort of freedom in the American system where you aren't tied to your school. Like, you're allowed to have a life outside of school. I went to school, and then when school was over, I might have done 2 or 3 clubs, video game club, anime club. I did ROTC, had National Honor Society, beta club, that stuff. Did I have anything else? There's a sort of beta club for ROTC that I did. That was kind of weird. But I might have done a few clubs. But then for the most part, I went home. And I chilled. I played Minecraft. Because this is before college. College is when I went home and, like, all my time was devoted to YouTube video creation. It's hard for me to imagine what I did before I did YouTube in my free time. But in America, you get to go home, and even though it's a small amount of time, relatively speaking, you get to take a breather. Japan, I didn't finish my school day. You go through all the clear classes. School ends around like 3, 4-ish, in which case you stay at school for several more hours for clubs. And then after that, you go to Juku, which is another school that's kind of translated to cram school, where you go to another school to, like, just reiterate everything you just learned. You know, it's a whole different set of tutors, though. But oftentimes the cram school is sponsored by the Board of Education, who know what's going on in the classroom. So then you go to the Juku. Sometimes they even have sports like, there are clubs for the cram school that people go to. You get home, like, maybe around 11 p.m., then you eat dinner, then you go to bed, after maybe doing some homework. Then 7 a.m. or kind of wake up at 6 a.m. ish, then 7 a.m. go to school, and you repeat that all over. If it's summer vacation, you go to JUCO all day. If it's spring break, you go to JUCO all day. I think they do it on winter break too. JUCO is a big deal, and that's cram school that you go to when school's out, either in a break or like when the school day's over, and after you've done like 2 to 3 hours of club work, you go over to the JUCO. So I like the free time provided by the American school system. The teaching style is kind of similar, I've noticed. American school systems often do group work, group projects. I guess I don't see that done too. I see that done a lot, but that's because I'm an English teacher, and that's communication. But I don't think other schools do, or other subjects, I should say, do group activity to the degree that America does group activity. Kindergarten is also not considered part of elementary school, by the way. Kindergarten, like in America, like you do stuff in kindergarten. In Japan, kindergarten's a lot more like preschool, where like, or what I imagine to be preschool to be. I didn't go to preschool, but like where the kids are just doing whatever they want to, and there's a teacher in there that's like, this is my life now. But I was never a fan of group projects and group work, but that's because my learning style does not jive well with that. I was in the unfortunate situation where my learning style was not the type of learning style that the teachers catered towards, and teachers tend to cater towards group activities, which as a teacher I did some group stuff just because I looked at my students and I understood what my students needed and where they thrived the best. I gave other students options to not do group work if they didn't want to. I think it's important not to just shove one learning style onto an entire class unless you know that the entire class will benefit from it. But Japan is definitely much more, kind of paradoxically, much more focused on the individual and the grades than the group work and the community when it comes to academics. But outside of academics, and it's all about the community. I liked America's freedom. I don't like America's over-reliance on group projects. I like America's freedom. That's a quote. I don't like Japan's moral education system. Frankly, as someone who values doing things my own way and being by myself, if I was a student in Japan, I would not like how every hour of your waking day is spent at school. It's intense. Either at school or at JUCO, which is pretty much at school, you know. That's probably what I would dislike the most. I would like the more individualized... individualized might not be but the individual-centric learning, teaching style. Discipline. Discipline in America is off the walls. Just ask how many people who were students in America have related to the experience where the class is going insane and the teacher just stops and goes, "I'll wait." You know, those specific 2 words. I think a lot of people would say, yeah, I've heard that happen. How many Americans have had the situation where a few kids are acting up, so the teacher, just tired of it, punishes the entire class? That happens a lot, I think. How many times have your classes went slower than you'd like because there's always been 1 or 2 students acting up? That happens a lot. In America, or in Japan, discipline is, I have some good schools, but for the most part, there's like a few problem students, but they don't really stop class. There's also the situation where I've seen Japanese teachers go off the walls, like on students, for doing something that would barely be considered like slight chatter in an American school. Like, I've seen teachers go full-on ballistic on students for something an American teacher probably wouldn't even realize they were doing, like, you know, talking over to a person beside them, while the teacher's talking, you know, whisper, like not like talking, but like whispering, like, so how do, hey, what are you doing there, Hirohito? Nobody's name is Hirohito. I've seen them go off the walls and just yell, leave. Just yell, leave. And like, in America, I think I've seen it done before, like, I can call your parents and have them pick you up since you're not gonna cooperate in class. But in Japan, I've just seen this teacher yell, leave, and the student goes, and then goes to the back, gets their stuff out of their cubby, and then leaves. I've seen that multiple times, which is insane to me. I probably shouldn't be laughing at that we're just kicking. And these are elementary schoolers, by the way. Just leave. And then they're gone. You know, they've been Thanos snapped. A lot of the students have more skills than American students do. A lot of them can dance, a lot of them can play instruments, a lot of them can speak other languages. Oftentimes, a lot of them do plays and stuff. And I don't mean like when you think of like an American school play, I mean like something like actual production quality plays. I already mentioned instruments, all sorts of dances, off the walls. Some will speak English, some will speak, in my case, Okinawan, and I've seen speech contests in both English and in Okinawan where the students show off their English or Okinawan skills, because Okinawan is a separate language from Japanese. Yeah. Wow, there was, yeah. And American elementary school students, I've rarely seen that sort of skill applied. Maybe some Hispanic students I've seen in elementary school speak 2 languages, but they're kind of in a situation where they have to. I don't think I've seen many elementary school students play an instrument besides the recorder. Certainly never seen them do a play or dances with the quality or production quality I've seen dances and plays be done here. Yeah. That's a big difference. I kind of like, even though we Thanos snaps. Oh, here's another thing. American schools, at least when I was teaching, really focused on like, what was the word we called them? I don't remember the term for it, but you know, what would have been called special students or special needs students back in the day. There's a lot of focus on that. There's a lot of like, I remember when I taught in high school, and like I would make a lesson plan, and then I was required to write in each lesson plan how I would make adaptations for, and then I'd have a stack of papers for my other students that had I believe they're called 504s, but like special needs plans that, you know, were individualized to show like this student learns better, blah blah blah, doing this. And I'm like, I will have this like I would have to make individual plans for every single student, and sometimes it would be half the class that I would have to make exemptions to the main lesson plan. Japan just doesn't really deal with that unless it's like massively obvious, meaning unless you have like a severe mental disability. If you have a severe mental disability, you're kind of stuck in one class. Well, in America, they kind of try to like integrate those students into the class, but if you have a severe disability in Japanese classes, you're put off into one classroom the entire day, usually with a special needs teacher. But other stuff like ADHD, ADD, any other mental health stuff are usually overlooked. Sometimes I'll see a student like acting up, and then the teacher will yell at them. I'm looking at the student, and I'm like, "You have ADD, don't you?" Like, and you're just not medicated, because nobody really, that culture of identifying that doesn't really exist here. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So in some ways it feels more like education, how I imagine education was like in like the 1980s before that stuff really became popular. Yeah. What I like, what I dislike. I think I covered that. There's probably a lot more I could say, but this video is drawing on much longer than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a rant where I concisely hit everything, but I guess that's not what a rant is. Thankfully, thankfully for those of you watching this video, but not thankfully for me who relies on Patreon for money, Josh Adkins was the only $5 plus tier patron to request a rant. But if you want to get your own rant, go check out the Patreon. Look at the tier list. Look at the tiers. And yeah, I can talk at length about whatever subjects, as long as they follow the guidelines presented. And yeah, that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I illuminated some things about the Japanese and American education systems. And yeah, have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. Where's my mouse?